Ursun woke me to keep this world safe. I intend to do so.
Boris Ursus, the Red Tzar, the greatest hero of Kislev since its founding. The man who single-handedly preserved this unwashed peasant nation from fading into irrelevance. Supposedly, one of the finest leaders of men and a mighty warrior. But in his black heart lies a secret so vile that even Slanesh has to blush in shame. For Boris is the original furry in the world. He has such an insatiable lust for the bear that one cannot help but wonder how far he has taken it. A sentiment apparently returned by the murderous polar bears of the north, to the great horror of the entire world. For they have allied Kislev, providing this weak excuse of a nation one last hope at power and glory. Chaos may bring its mighty demons and engines of war. Kislev has bare cavalry. It was this lust for Ursun that brought Boris back from the dead. But unlike a wise leader that might have turned to unify his weak nation, he has instead gathered a mighty army to invade the Chaos Wasteland itself, figuring that a direct invasion is a better choice than resolving the temper tantrums of his children back home. He is wrong.
Welcome everyone, Christine here with my campaign overview guide for Boris Ursus, who is actually secretly one of the better legendary lords in the game. I wouldn't say he's one of the best because he is still a Kislev legendary lord, but he actually does have quite a lot of things going for him in his campaign. Now over here in this particular campaign that I just started, I just rushed to take the Tower of Torment while ignoring the starting army. By the way, you cannot resolve both this battle over here and this battle and still have your entire army intact, more or less. You'll only take quite a bit of damage to Patriarch, but that's going to be something you can easily recover from. Now, here's the benefits of Boris's campaign. You get 30 diplomatic relations with the Ice Court, a benefit to colonizing the Chaos Wasteland. So you get devotion. It's unpleasant as opposed to an uninhabitable climate. So you can actually make an empire in the Chaos Waste, and this is actually pretty substantial in a campaign as Kislev because you're going to be bordering the Chaos Waste regardless of what you do in your campaign. Also, construction time of -1 for provincial capital and settlement buildings means you can grow your empire faster. And then the recruit rank for warbear units, it's quite a substantial benefit for those units just starting at a higher rank. On top of that, Boris, he gets a -50% upkeep for warbearers, benefits against chaos in terms of fighting them, in terms of leadership and melee attack, and also an immunity to chaos, undivided corruption, and crucially chaos waste situation. So if you're going to conquer the chaos waste, Boris is actually one of the better legendary lords to do it on the forces of order. That and people like Oxiatl, but there are basically exceptions. Beyond that, he also has a pretty good skill line. The most significant things over here, beyond the benefits to units and combat benefits, 10% campaign movement range, 10 growth in all provinces, a no colonization cost, Grand Builder, and Khan King. Now, -10% motherland invocation cost is actually pretty substantial because invocations scale in terms of their cost the more territory you control. So having reduction in the cost of invocation can be pretty substantial. But why is that? Well, basically, you can upgrade the dash invocation. Like early on, you'll always want to use Ursun in your campaign, but later on you can invoke dash and keep it invoked, so you're gaining a significant economic benefit and an army benefit, because once you upgrade this invocation through the research tree over here, I believe it is right here for Prague. Once you upgrade this, what this will do, it will increase the income from all buildings and add the land's awakened army ability. That basically gives you an elemental warbear summon for every single one of your armies. That is actually a substantial combat ability you can have if you upgrade that. And basically as Boris, you're always going to have more devotion than either Kastaltin or Katrin, even if you don't use mods. Now, a mod I recommend for Kislev is a mod that allows you to gain devotion from fighting pretty much every other foe except like Kislev itself. And this is a fairly substantial benefit to have dash invoked, or the other ones if you so desire. Like you can either invoke Saliak or dash, Urson can be a benefit early on in your campaign for the supporters. Now, speaking about the supporters, another thing that Boris does have a substantial benefit in his campaign is how the supporter system works for him. He basically can completely ignore it. So you don't have to worry about this meter, and you only really have to worry about this meter once either Dice Court or Castalton get to 50 supporters. That's the point where you can start spending supporters. So you don't have to rush for it. You still have to wait for Castalton or Katrin to get to 50. And once one of them gets to 50, you can support either of them. If you support Katrin, you get growth, which is actually pretty substantial. If you support Castalton, you get control. I would argue supporting Katrin is probably the better choice when it comes to growing your empire. Furthermore, Boris has a really good starting army, probably one of the best starting armies in the game. That isn't a joke. Like, with the exception of like the Warriors of Chaos and their very substantial armies at the start of their campaigns and the ability to grow those very quickly through Gifts of Chaos and Warband recruitment, Boris probably has flat out one of the best starting armies. And the reason is he has 2 Tsar Guard, 2 Armor Cossars, and 2 Warbear Riders. Each of these units is really good for Kislev, and each of these units is really good in Outresolve because they're heavily armored units with high leadership, so they will tend to do very well in an Outresolve situation. What this army actually allows you to do is, with some exceptions like assaulting a heavily fortified settlement with a major army behind it, what this allows you to do is wipe out anyone in an open field battle, and especially without resolve. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Archeon on legendary difficulty or anyone else. You can and will win that fight against virtually every other foe that you will encounter early on in your campaign without resolve. If you have to fight a battle, most of the time you'll win it, and if you have to fight a battle to win it, it's usually going to be a siege battle. Those do suck. But in an open field battle, you are the king of this particular area. No one comes even close to your power level. The reason I believe Creative Assembly decided to do this is because they designed Boris's campaign under the premise that you're going to fight in this particular province. Well, Bloodfire Falls sucks. Significantly sucks. So what you want to do as Boris is you want to start your campaign, take out this army, which is something I didn't do here, and then spend 2 turns, just 2 turns recruiting. You'll get 15 units, you'll have the money for them, you shouldn't invoke Urson right ahead, and then go for Frozen Landing. Now, the reason you want to do it, it's not just because your initial province sucks, it's not because of the climate of it, it's also because Frozen Landing is also a major caravan destination for cafe and caravans. Even if you decide not to raid them for tens of thousands of gold, potentially each really, or put together, you still will gain quite a bit of gold from those caravans going for your territory. 3,000 per caravan. Now, I will not necessarily bother too much with the province over here, especially now with Carrick Flag, but this is your jumping point. Once you arrive here, what do you do? Once you arrive here in the Frozen Landing, what you do is you take over these 2 territories, and you should sell at least the temple to Prague. And you can establish good relations with Prague, or you can go to war against Prague. Because what usually happens is, because you arrive here at the Frozen Landing at that particular point, then the Norscan army will be yours to deal with, experience, money, all that. But that means Prague will have no opponent until the Skaven comes in. So you can either fight Prague, pay the supporter cost and the devotion cost, because whenever you declare war on Kislev faction, you lose 100 supporters, or you can just keep marching with your very powerful army and march over here in Troll Country to deal with Frot. And you can arrive quickly enough that at that particular point, Frot will be vulnerable. He will wipe out the Drazina Enclave very quickly, but he will have his army spread out over here, and he will be vulnerable. You wipe these 2 forts. Once you wait for Frot to take them, then you take them for yourself. Then you deal with Frot, you gain Help Hit. Now, you should ideally, in a lot of circumstances, if Krakadrak needs it, you should give Help It to Krakadrak. You shouldn't give Troll Country to Krakadrak, because Kostaltin has a tendency of declaring war on Krakadrack in that circumstance. But take help it. If you need to give it to Krakadrack for them to survive, you do so. And the reason you want to do so is because you want to keep them alive as your northern barrier, so they keep Trog under control. Now, you may have to deal with Trog's own army over here. If you do wipe out 1 or 2 stacks on any difficulty of Trog's armies, he's basically going to cease to be a major threat. I mean, he will eventually resurge and wipe out Krakadrack, or maybe you're just giving Wulfric over here every opportunity to confederate all of Northgard. That is the downside of dealing with Trog. But you will keep Krakadrack. Once you've secured Krakadrack, or even before that, you will also want to wipe out the Zazel, give the Tower of Krak over here to Kostaltin, and with that in mind, you will have a secure northern frontier. You may hold Helpit, and you should certainly hold Prague, as well as Troll Country. You may want to hold on to Troll Country for the long term of your campaign. What do you do after that? Well, here's the benefit, a major benefit of Boris's campaign. You can actually declare war on any Kislev faction. This includes Catherine and Kostaltin, so you can actually unify Kislev faster than either Catherine or Kostaltin can, which means you can gain access to their cities. You can also confederate diplomatically. You don't have to get 600 supporters. You just need to do it diplomatically. That means taking and trading away territory. Of course, Kostaltin and Catherine do hate each other, so getting the good diplomatic relations of both of them is going to be problematic. I would probably advise giving Troll Country to Kostaltin, because you do have that major diplomatic benefit with Catherine, but eventually you will get good relations with both Kostaltin and Catherine. But what you do once you've dealt with Azazel and to a degree with Trog? Well, you shouldn't bother with the Eastern Oblast. Frozen Landing is a good jumping point, but you should basically abandon this entire part of the map. Because although Clan Ferric, which starts over here in Character Room, will probably conquer all of this, they can't conquer Prague. Even if they try to, and I've never seen them try, once you get Prague to Tier 2 or Tier 3, they won't be able to take it. And here's the thing about Kislev. Never bother with the minor Kislevite provinces. Always care about holding the cities, because that's where all the benefits are. And you do have a very powerful army. But then there's the end game of Kislev, and how you really make a campaign as Kislev work. And this is where Boris is uniquely suited. I've mentioned he has the most powerful army, one of the most powerful starting armies in the game. That isn't a joke. This army is really good, really powerful. There's some tier 4 units here, tier 3, tier 4 units. They're all really good units that will do exceptionally well and punch way above their weight in Autoresolve. And that in combination with Kossars and War Sleds and other units you can get later on. Like a full army of armor Kossars will do quite well in battles, and you can easily regenerate any casualties you take with Patriarchs, and you can start with one. But on top of that, you do have some opportunities here in this campaign. Ones that Catherine and Kostaltin don't necessarily have. Here's the problem that Catherine and Kostaltin have. You want to try and preserve the other. Well, if you're playing as Boris, then both Kostaltin and Catherine will be played by the AI. So all the issues that they encounter in their campaigns, they're not issues you have to deal with. They're issues that the AI has to deal with. And while Catherine and Kostaltin may lose, if you wipe out Frat and Azazel, they're generally not going to lose their campaigns, and you will build up over time good relations with them automatically because of your skill line, because of the way Kislev works as a faction. So you're going to be getting military alliances, eventually confederation with them. What should you do in this campaign? Well, one of the things I would do in this campaign, I would not bother with Osterland, though there is a gold mine over there. What I would do is take the Ostermark. Like, once you've dealt with Front and Azazel, and to a degree Trog, I would not go to wipe him out. I would just wipe out his main army at the very least. Make sure Krakadrack stays alive. Maybe build a second army to support Boris, but follow Boris and go with Prague under your control, and a lot of money from trading Helpit and Troll Country to other factions, and maybe quite the entirety of Eastern Oblast. You can confederate Prague diplomatically, by the way. It may take some time, but you can do it. Initially, you can use Helpit for a while as basically your capital, but then you can trade it away. Anyway, you should take the Ostermark in this particular campaign. The reason you should take the Ostermark and why it's such a valuable province is, one, it has pottery, and two, it has pasture, so it's got good growth. But crucially, here's the thing: is Kislev, your main economic building chain, which you can't construct in the Kislevite cities or the Kislevite provinces, but you can do it in Ostermark, gives you up to 50% tradable resources. On top of that, tradable resources in general, like pottery or pastures, do give Kislev faction-wide economic benefits to farms and caravans. So Ostermark is an amazingly good region for Kislev, and you should take it. Once you've taken it, or if you've bypassed it because you want to deal with Draika, one of the things you should absolutely do: avoid the direct confrontation with Draika until you have overwhelming force, but go and wipe out the Griffin Wit, because that will eliminate her ability to recruit good units. She won't be able to recruit treekin, tree spirits, dryads, all that. She'll have some forest animals, but they won't stand a chance against your army. You're actually one of the few people that can actually take Draika head to head. The only other person in this area that can do so, the only other two are Azag, but only if you bring like 2 full armies, maybe with Was associated with them, to deal with her, and Vlad because of the ridiculous power of Legendary Lords of the Vampires. And it would be a pretty hard fight as Vlad against Draika. Usually speaking, when it comes to most campaigns, I'd say directly avoid the confrontation with Draika, but by the time you arrive, she's going to be weakened by fighting Azag, because that's what tends to happen in campaigns, at least the ones I play on Legendary. She ends up fighting Azag. You take advantage of that, you sack the Griffin Wood, you sell it to Talabayam, or you keep it, raise it, whatever, get rid of it. You don't want to spend the money on it. Take the Ostermark and then conquer all of Sylvania and beyond. Also take Zufbar, because by the time you arrive here, Vlad should have taken out, if you're playing on a high difficulty especially, Vlad should have taken out Zufbar as well. Now, your army is far more substantial than Vlad. Now, Vlad is an absolute monster in battle, but the army he will have to throw against you will not stand a chance against yours. So you take Sylvania, you take Zufbar, you've got 4 really good provinces: Zufbar, Blackwater, Southern Sylvania, Northern Sylvania, and Ostermark. And you may want to deal with Azag to a degree or another. What I would say is you want to keep Karak Ungor for yourself, give the other 2 provinces to Ungrim. By this point, you should be able to confederate Kastaltin or Katrin, or both. And what you want to do here, really, with Ungrim, and this is actually a critical point, because if you confederate Kastaltin and Katrin, then you're going to have to deal with the northern frontier as opposed to letting them do it. Well, one of the things you can do, and this is the clever thing, if you take portions of this province and you trade it to Ungrim, then you can trade the Southern Oblast. Then you can trade Troll Country and even the Tower of Karak to Ungrim. Now, the AI has a tendency when you sell a territory to try and defend that territory that you just given it. So what Ungrim will naturally do in this campaign when you do so, he will move his entire freaking army all the way north, and he won't have opponents, because most campaigns, Ungrim, what he does is he helps Thorgrim survive against Skarsnik, and even if Skarsnik's still an issue, Ungrim is a really bad legendary lord to play, but he's actually a really good ally because he's in a pretty safe position, and because of all the benefits the AI has, it helps to deal with a lot of the issues that dwarves generally have as a faction, like economy, growth, etc., casualty replenishment even. So what you do is you sell the Southern Oblast and Troll Country and the Tower of Karak to Ungrim, which are all worthless territories, and guess what Ungrim will do? He'll literally end up fighting all of Norska on his own. Maybe he wins, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he conquers all of Norska on his own. Now, eventually, you are going to have to deal with Archeon and Sigvald and others in the north, but by that point, you will have a substantial foothold in the Empire, maybe all of the Empire. You could conquer the entirety of the Empire, like Stirland would be worth it. Averland, not so much. Gelt's province, not so much. Nuln, yes, it would, because there's quite a few tradable resources here. And even, like, the Southern Grey Mountains. Like, there's a lot of territory to take that's really valuable as Kislev because of the trade resources. You shouldn't go to war with Gelt or Karl Franz, however. Try and avoid that situation. The Empire won't be pissed if you wipe out some Electro counts, by the way. One of the things I did in one of the campaigns, I got Midland, Talabekland, Osterland, Stirland, Sylvania, and Ostland, of course. Like, have Karl Franz and Geld be your southern border. Don't bother with the southern Grey Mountains, because that's just going to piss off Durfu. And you don't want to war necessarily with Alpha Lauren. At least not early on. Give Ungrim some territory over here. Have him fight the war with Norsky, and you go deal with Archeon, Kolik, and all that kind of stuff. The one issue in this campaign is that your short campaign victory condition requires you to deal with Archeon. So by following this plan, you will give Archeon every chance in the world to grow to be a mega faction. So it can take you quite a bit longer to achieve the short campaign victory condition. But I'll be honest with you, this is the best faction. This is the best legendary lord for Kislev by a lot. It's actually the best faction, I feel, of like this entire starting area. Like, yes, I would say it's better than Azazel, because yeah, Warriors of Chaos are really powerful, but fighting a campaign in this area like Esfrat or Azazel is a pretty miserable experience, I have to say. Archeon himself, for all his power, he doesn't necessarily have a great campaign or a fun campaign. As Boris, you're just on a steamroller with no real opposition, because you're just going to be dealing with minor factions. And even the with minor factions initially, and when you do start encountering Azazel and Fraud, they'll be weakened by fighting other factions, and you'll just defeat them in detail. And then you just march in Sylvania. You're always taking advantage of the fighting that these factions will have with others. And that's where you come in. You're kind of like a locust, really, preying on the weak and the helpless, though I wouldn't necessarily call Vlad helpless. But Boris does have a lot of things going in his campaign. He doesn't even have to care about the supporter system. You don't have to care about invocations. You don't have to care about devotion at all, except for the structures you build. But you don't have to keep an invocation up. It's just beneficial to do so. Growth, control, and of course, eventually when you can full-on switch to dash and still have supporters, economic benefits, army benefits as well. And you can also gain Castalton and Katrin as legendary lords in your factions far earlier than either Katrin or Castalton can gain each other. So you're going to have all three major Kislev cities with all the faction-wide benefits they provide, with all the benefits Katrin and Castalton provide as legendary lords, and you're just going to become one of the dominant factions in this area. It is a powerful campaign. It's an easy-to-understand campaign. It's not one that requires a lot of fight. Just understand this. Get the hell out. Go into Kislev. Fight in Kislev. Like, I know this. And then fight in the Empire. I know this sounds shocking, but actually fighting a campaign in Kislev as Kislev for the first few turns is a smart thing to do. And then you go conquer significant portions of the Empire. If the Astromark is alive, just declare war on them. Take them out. If Taliban decides to piss you off, take them out. Take off Festus. Doesn't really matter. Take out Festus if you want to deal with him. He can actually be a speed bump, because he's going to pick a fight with every other faction around him, so you can just arrive with 2 free stacks and just wipe him out. He can be a speed bump for you. It's pretty telling when you think about this campaign, and you say things like that, because Festus, Frat, Azazel, Azag, Vlad, Draika, those are nightmarish legendary lords to deal with for a lot of people. Like, if you're playing as Vlad, picking up direct flight with Azag is generally an issue. Or with Draika. Or if you're playing as the Empire, dealing with Vlad is an absolute freaking nightmare. Or if you're playing as, or fighting Azag as any of the other factions, it can be an issue. But as Boris, because you're just hopping right in when they're already fighting other factions, they're speed bumps for you. The only major issue is, of course, Archeon, who is going to grow, who is going to gain a lot of power in his faction, and you're also going to get the Demon Prince over here to become an issue. Or maybe the Demon Prince will just be wiped out by Malice Darkblade. Hard to say. Sometimes Malice gets wiped out, sometimes he wins, but then gets wiped out eventually by Sigvald. Actually, Sigvald secretly is the best legendary lord of the Warriors of Chaos when it comes to control by the AI. I've seen this guy conquer the entirety of the Northern Chaos Waste, no joke. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and look, boys and girls, if you do enjoy my content, support me via PayPal or Patreon. It would be greatly appreciated. It does help me keep doing content on this channel.